this whole Travis Hunter situation. Originally, I was like, we're going to talk about the couple. We'll get to that because this is bothering me a little bit, y'all. So it's time to talk about it. So Travis Hunter's fiancé, Leanna, released an 8-minute video on TikTok addressing all the issues people have said about her. She addressed her saying that Travis Hunter originally wasn't her type. And she said that when Travis originally DM'd her, he had a girlfriend, so she ignored him until he was single because she's not a homewrecker, and why would her type be that? She also said that she's never had a physical type, goes on and lists the types of people that she's been with: a white cowboy, soccer player, SoundCloud rapper, all those things. Then in a separate video, Travis basically stuck up for his fiance and basically said she's been crying herself to sleep and drinking a lot and basically like, y'all don't know them, chill out, all that. So from what you've heard and what you've seen, Mace, gonna ask you first, how do you feel about all of this discussion around basically their relationship?
When I look at this situation, I want to be sensitive to it because I know this is his wife. Anybody got a wife, they're gonna care about it. But when it comes to the things that she's saying, if I take myself out of it and just talk about what it is that I'm seeing, is one of those cases where you don't understand the moment you're in. That's just the best way to explain it. When she talks about the type of people she dated, okay, that's cool. The SoundCloud rapper, I'm for that as a fellow MC. Then she talks about the different things about how she wasn't dealing with him because he was dating other people. I'm for that, definitely, being consistent in that. But then you turn around and date him after you say that he's a known cheater. If he's known to you as a cheater, when you meet him, he's trying to cheat. So even if you date him later, you were dating someone who was a cheater. I'm just saying this from a woman's point of view. From a guy's, we get it. Pause. But when you talk about the things that goes along with her, the real issue is that when you're dealing with Travis, you got to understand that he's the prize in the situation. And that's what everybody is really coming down on her about. She's not seeing him as a prize. She's seeing him as just a regular nigga. And the best way to lose a king is to try to treat a king like a regular nigga. Like, it would be like a woman, my wife, trying to treat me like a regular nigga. I'm not a regular nigga. I don't make regular money. I don't do regular things. Ain't nothing about me regular. Nothing is regular about any person that lives on that level. And you take the last interview, or not even an interview, the last time he's doing a photo shoot, he wins the Heisman. She's sitting there like, what am I supposed to do? Just sit here? What else are you going to do? Hit cartwheels? Yes, this is going to be your life. People are going to be focusing on him. And it can't look like he got to always defer to you and turn everything and make it about you so you could feel comfortable, because that means the moment is too big for you. And that's what I would say. So I would definitely, even though I'm giving some strong information here, you guys definitely should look into counseling. Definitely look into that very fast, because that's going to help you guys stay together if staying together is really what you guys want, because there's some things that you need that he's not going to be able to give you, just because of the caliber of person he is. And I know that was a long take, but that's what I wanted to share.
I got two things to say, and then I'll let Stat go. Steph Curry's wife had a moment like this when she was at the red table. Like, I feel that he's just all about, everybody's like all about him and this, that, and the third, and nobody's paying me no mind. This when Jada had everybody while I was bugging the fuck out. And that shit went away quick. It lasted about a week. Because she understood, like, I don't know what Steph said, I don't know what happened, but she calmed down a week. Take a look into whatever happened with that. That's one thing. And then the last thing I'll say is this, because I don't really have much to say about it. Because I have no delayed sensitivity. So I just won't say too much about it. The one thing that I will say is that sponsors and teams are going to look at this. It's not draft yet. You just signed with Adidas. I think she's in the commercial, if I'm
She
not
is.
mistaken. She's in the new Adidas commercial. So shit go left. She said, I've been there from the beginning. So I would just take into heed, and I'm not saying she's going left, but I'm just saying take into heed. You're not drafted yet. You have millions of people that want to do sponsorship, and you may be scaring some of them away with some of the things that you have on your personal life. Keep your personal, and then business. And when you want to exploit your personal, at least go get your 300-400 million and then get into this. You got a lot of money out of you, young man. And I would definitely take heed to the sponsorship dollars that's in front of you, and also not make an NFL team scared that this situation will cause a headache. Because look, you've been with her 5 years and you've been busting ass every year. You just won the Heisman. That was playing 140 snaps a game. So obviously this isn't anything new. It's just your celebrity's growing, and maybe she's not used to it. So that's all I say. Just think about your money for both of y'all. If that's who you're going to be with in the future, this is going to affect your bottom line moving forward.
Yeah, I actually agree 100% with everything that you guys both said. I actually hate this entire situation because it didn't need to get to this point if people just kept things private. And I know it's a situation where it's like, of course, her feelings are valid and his feelings are valid as well. He cares about his fiance, so he's going to stick up for her. But in certain situations, especially when you know who you're dealing with, or maybe she didn't know who she was dealing with and not expecting him to get to this point or this level, as a woman, especially when your man is at a certain level, you got to be selfless. You know, you're going to have to handle those situations elsewhere because, again, this is a topic that we're discussing. And of course, we're going to discuss it because he is a celebrity. This is part of the news. People are going to talk about it, whether you want them to talk about it or not. You have to learn that you don't have to address everything, and not everything's going to be about you. Like, I tell my friends this all the time. They're like, oh, if I want to date like a rapper, an athlete, like, girl, it's not going to be about you. That's just the truth. And you have to understand that. And that's okay. Now, if you're not okay with that, that's a discussion that needs to be had in private so you figure out your next steps and can move forward. Because this lifestyle is not for everybody. Yeah. Learning that more and more every day is not for everybody. There's a lot of things that are going to be out there that you don't necessarily want out there, and you can't control that. So if you want to jump ship, and I'm not saying do that, you know, if you guys can work it out, do that because that'd be great. But this is only the tip of the iceberg. It's going to get very more difficult from here. He's going to be around a lot of women. He's going to make a lot of money. He's going to see a lot of people every day. He's going to have access to things that normal people don't. You ain't with it. Now would be the time to get out.
When you're a public figure, you can't escape being publicly responsible, and that's what is going to be a rude of awakening for her. And one of the things you don't want to do is run to the internet. You know, when people know they bother you, they're going to bother you more. And I say this in your defense and to protect yourself and to protect your mental space. Don't feel like you have to go to the internet and answer every question, because if you start it like this, then they're gonna troll you even more to make sure they constantly are talking to you. And that's the first thing I had to learn with the internet, being a person that really wasn't on the internet. Like, man, all these people be talking, like, who is this nigga to be saying this? And you gotta recognize these are just people. They have a keyboard. They have an opinion.
And they're trolls, and half the time they don't even got a real profile picture. I had to learn that because people be making me mad. And I'm like, Treasure, you can't get mad. Just go. So, yeah. Hope you take our advice. Wish y'all both the best of luck. And before we close, just got to get you guys' prediction on this NBA Cup Finals. OKC versus the Bucks. Mace, who do you think wins?
I want to say Milwaukee because I got a lot of people there, but OKC. I'm going OKC.
This is actually a really good game.
Is Chet playing?
He's out.
He hurt.
Oh.
They're playing good without Chet, though. They still in first place.
In the Bucks.
Damn, that's a good one. Go with the Bucks.
Okay, we will know the decision later to see if you guys were correct. But that is all the time that we have for today. Thank y'all for watching. And as always, it is what it is.
What you just watched was not really a conversation about a football player and his fiancé. It was a conversation about power, about timing, and about what happens when two people fall in love before one of them becomes famous, and then have to figure out how to survive after the fame arrives. That is the real story buried underneath the TikTok videos, the comment sections, and the arguments online. Travis Hunter did not just win the Heisman Trophy. He crossed a threshold. He stepped from being a talented young man with a promising future into being a public commodity, a brand, a symbol that millions of people now feel entitled to have opinions about. And the moment he crossed that threshold, everything around him changed too, including his relationship, whether he was ready for that or not. Leanna's 8-minute video was an attempt to control a narrative that had already slipped out of her hands. Think about what she was actually trying to do. She was trying to answer strangers, to explain herself to people who do not know her, to defend a relationship that exists in private but is now being dissected in public like a court case. She talked about her dating history, the type of men she has been with, the timeline of when Travis first reached out, the fact that he had a girlfriend at the time, and she waited until he was single. On paper, none of that sounds unreasonable. People date who they date. People have preferences. People wait for the right moment to pursue someone. But the problem was never really the facts themselves. The problem was what those facts represented once they were placed inside a much bigger story that the public was already telling about who Travis Hunter is and who deserves to be standing next to him. That is the deeper truth in what was being discussed. When someone becomes the biggest name in college football, when they become a walking billion-dollar decision for franchises, agents, and sponsors, they stop being judged as a private individual making private choices. They become a symbol, and the people around that symbol get pulled into the same spotlight whether they consented to it or not. Leanna did not ask to become a case study in relationship dynamics on a podcast. She did not sign up to have her past scrutinized by millions of strangers. But that is the cost of proximity to someone at that level of fame, and it is a cost very few people are actually prepared for until they are already living inside it. The point raised about treating him like the prize is worth sitting with because it captures something real about how fame reshapes relationships from the inside out. It is not that one person becomes worth more as a human being than another. It is that the public perception of value shifts, and with it, the expectations placed on how someone should behave, present themselves, and communicate. When your partner is being photographed at every turn, celebrated at award shows, courted by sponsors, and treated as a generational talent, there is an unspoken expectation that the people closest to him will absorb some of that spotlight quietly, without making the moment about their own insecurities in public. That does not mean feelings do not matter. It does not mean a partner should be invisible or silent. It means that the timing and the platform for working through those feelings matters enormously, and airing them online, in a moment when the world is already watching every headline about him, changes the entire equation. This is where the comparison to Aisha Curry becomes so useful. Years ago, she expressed frustration about feeling overlooked while her husband received endless attention and admiration. It was a real feeling, a human feeling, and plenty of partners of high-profile athletes have felt exactly the same thing. But what stood out is not that she felt that way. It is how it was handled. It became a brief moment, addressed, processed, and then it faded because the relationship had the tools to absorb it without turning it into a prolonged public spectacle. That is the model being pointed to here. Feel what you feel. Talk about it. Get support if you need it. But do not let frustration curdle into a public back and forth that invites millions of strangers to referee your relationship, because once that door opens, it rarely closes clean. There is also a very specific and often overlooked layer to this entire situation, and it has to do with money, timing, and leverage, which is exactly why the conversation shifted towards sponsorships and the NFL draft. Travis Hunter has not been drafted yet. He signed with Adidas, he is reportedly featured in their campaigns, and he stands at the exact moment in his career where perception is currency. Teams evaluate more than throwing motion or coverage skills before committing tens of millions of dollars to a player. They evaluate stability, whether a young athlete's personal life will become a distraction in a locker room, a headline machine during a losing streak, or a liability that costs a franchise goodwill with fans. Sponsors think about it too. Every commercial, every campaign, every partnership is built on public trust and public image. Adidas is not just paying for athletic performance. They are paying for a story, a feeling that consumers associate with the brand. When that story gets complicated by public relationship drama, it does not necessarily end a deal, but it absolutely gets noticed in boardrooms where decisions about future contracts, extensions, and campaign placements are made quietly, long before the public ever hears about them. This is the blunt, unglamorous truth about fame at this level. It is not just about talent. It is about controlling the narrative around that talent, because perception moves money, and money moves opportunity. A player can be the most gifted athlete in his draft class and still watch endorsement dollars slide toward someone else simply because that other player's personal life looks calmer, less likely to generate a news cycle a brand does not want attached to their name. That is not fair in the emotional sense, but it is real in the business sense, and it is exactly why there was such an emphasis on separating private matters from public ones, at least until the financial stakes reach a point where a couple has secured enough generational wealth to weather any storm. It is also worth acknowledging something that rarely gets said out loud in these conversations, which is that Travis stepping in to defend his fiancé says something meaningful about him as a person. He did not distance himself from her when the criticism intensified. He did not let the internet dictate how he responds to someone he loves. He spoke up, described her emotional toll, described the crying, the drinking, the weight of being publicly picked apart, and asked people to have some humanity about it. That instinct to protect someone you love, even when the smarter business move might be silence, says something about loyalty and character that should not be dismissed just because the timing of it created more headlines. Loyalty and strategic silence are not always the same thing, and choosing loyalty over optics, even briefly, is not necessarily a bad reflection on someone's values, even if it complicates the broader narrative that sponsors and franchises are watching. But loyalty and wisdom are two different skills, and both partners in this situation are learning, in real time, in front of an audience, a skill most people get to build privately over years of trial and error. Most couples get to have their arguments in kitchens, in cars, in bedrooms, away from cameras and comment sections. Travis and Leanna do not have that luxury anymore, and that loss of privacy is one of the least talked about costs of fame. Everyone focuses on the money, the access, the glamour, but very few talk about what it means to lose the basic human right to have a bad day with your partner without it becoming public property. This is why the advice about counseling was not just a throwaway line. It was actually one of the most important pieces of guidance offered, because navigating a relationship that exists partly in private and partly under a magnifying glass requires tools that most couples never had to develop. A licensed therapist, someone trained specifically in relationships affected by public life, fame, and sudden wealth, can help two people build a shared language for handling moments like this before they escalate into 8-minute public statements. It is not weakness to need that kind of support. It is actually one of the smartest moves a young couple entering this kind of spotlight can make, because the alternative, working it out entirely through social media posts and public rebuttals, almost always makes things worse, not better. There is a broader lesson here that extends far beyond Travis Hunter and his fiancée, and it applies to anyone dating someone whose career is on a rapid upward trajectory, whether that is an athlete, an entertainer, an entrepreneur, or anyone else stepping into a level of visibility they were not fully prepared for. The lesson is this: not everything needs to be addressed. Not every rumor, not every comment section, not every stranger's opinion deserves a response. Responding gives oxygen to conversations that would otherwise fade within days. Silence, uncomfortable as it feels in a moment, is often the more powerful and more protective choice, because trolls and critics feed on engagement. The moment they realize someone is listening, reacting, hurting, and typing back, they escalate. The moment someone stops feeding that cycle, most of it burns out faster than anyone expects. That does not mean feelings should be suppressed or ignored. It means there is a difference between processing something and publicizing something. Processing happens with people you trust, a partner, a therapist, close friends. Publicizing happens when private pain becomes public content, and once it becomes public content, it stops belonging entirely to the person who shared it. It becomes something the internet can reshape, mock, and repurpose endlessly, long after the original intention has been forgotten. That is one of the cruelest ironies of defending yourself online. It often creates more material for critics than staying silent ever would have. There is also something worth saying about the specific dynamic of being a young woman entering a relationship with a man on the edge of superstardom. The world she is stepping into does not operate by the same rules as an ordinary relationship. It comes with expectations that are rarely spoken aloud until someone violates them, and then suddenly everyone has an opinion about what she should have known and prepared for. That is an unfair amount of pressure to place on anyone, especially someone who fell in love with a person, not a brand or a business proposition. But unfair does not mean untrue. The reality of dating someone destined for that level of visibility is that the relationship stops being purely personal. It becomes partially public, partially financial, and partially strategic, and learning to hold all of those layers without losing the emotional core of the relationship is one of the hardest transitions a couple can go through. This is why the phrase used, that this is only the tip of the iceberg, carries real weight. Right now, Travis Hunter has not even been drafted. He has not signed a rookie contract, has not entered a locker room as a professional, has not dealt with a losing season, a benching, an injury, a trade rumor, or any of the countless pressures that come with a professional sports career. The version of fame he is experiencing right now, as intense as it feels, is genuinely just the beginning. If a relationship cannot absorb the pressure of an 8-minute TikTok explanation now, the real question becomes whether it can survive years of far greater scrutiny, far more temptation, far more access to things that test loyalty and commitment in ways most relationships never have to face. That is not meant as a prediction of failure. It is meant as an honest acknowledgement of the road ahead and a genuine piece of advice to build the emotional infrastructure now, before the stakes get even higher. What makes this entire discussion resonate with so many people watching, even those who have never met an athlete or a celebrity, is that the core dynamic is universal. Anyone who has watched a partner succeed rapidly while they themselves felt left behind, invisible, or unsure of their place in the relationship knows this feeling intimately. Anyone who has had to learn, sometimes painfully, that not every insecurity needs to be voiced the moment it appears knows this feeling too. And anyone who has ever had to decide whether to defend themselves publicly against criticism or simply let time do the work of proving people wrong understands exactly the tension being described here. Fame just puts a magnifying glass on emotional patterns that exist in relationships everywhere. The stakes are higher, the audience is bigger, but the underlying human experience, feeling unseen, needing reassurance, wanting to be prioritized, struggling with change, is something almost everyone can recognize from their own life. There is a certain kind of maturity required to stand next to someone whose star is rising faster than yours, and it is not about shrinking yourself or pretending your feelings do not matter. It is about choosing your moments, protecting your peace, and understanding that public validation is not the same as private security. A relationship does not need millions of strangers to agree it is healthy. It needs two people who trust each other and are willing to do the unglamorous work of growing together instead of performing togetherness for an audience. That distinction, performance versus substance, is what separates relationships that survive fame from relationships that get consumed by it. None of this excuses the intensity of the public reaction either. There is a cruelty to how quickly the internet turns a private relationship into entertainment, tearing apart a woman's dating history and treating her like a villain in a story she did not choose to broadcast. That cruelty is real, and it deserves acknowledgement. But acknowledging the cruelty of the internet does not change the strategic reality of how to navigate it. Understanding that people will be unkind does not mean engaging with that unkindness is ever a winning strategy. The advice to step back and protect her mental space is not about excusing bad behavior online. It is about refusing to let strangers dictate her emotional state and her next move. At the heart of everything discussed is a simple but powerful truth about fame and relationships. The people who succeed at navigating both learn to separate what is theirs to control from what is not. They cannot control what strangers say or the speed at which gossip spreads. What they can control is how they respond, how much oxygen they give to outside noise, and how intentional they are about protecting the relationship from becoming public property. There is one more thread worth pulling on, and it has to do with the way modern fame collapses the distance between a person and their audience in ways that simply did not exist a generation ago. Athletes used to have gatekeepers. A reporter had to ask a question, an editor had to approve a story, a network had to decide something was newsworthy before it reached the public. That system was flawed in plenty of ways, but it created buffers, delays, and filters that gave people time to think before their private lives became headlines. Now, anyone with a phone and a following can post directly to millions of people in seconds, with no editor, no filter, and no cooling-off period. Leanna did not need a magazine to publish her side of the story. She recorded it herself, on her own terms, and pushed it straight to an audience that was already primed to react. That is a kind of power previous generations of partners never had, but it is also a kind of exposure they never had to survive either. The same tool that let her speak directly to her critics also stripped away any buffer between her raw emotion and millions of strangers ready to dissect every word, every tone shift, every pause. That is the trade-off built into this era of fame, and it applies just as much to Travis as it does to her. It is also worth noting how quickly this entire cycle repeats itself across different corners of celebrity culture, because this is not really a new story. It is an old story wearing a new outfit. Every generation has its version of this exact dynamic, a rising star, a partner trying to find their footing beside that rise, an audience eager to assign blame, and a media ecosystem hungry to turn private struggle into public content. What changes is the platform, the speed, and the scale, but the underlying human drama stays remarkably consistent. That consistency is actually useful because it means there are lessons to draw from every couple who has walked this road before, the ones who made it through, and the ones who did not. The couples who survived tended to share a few things in common. They protected their communication from outside noise, they resisted the urge to let public opinion settle private disagreements, and they built a support system, whether that was therapy, mentorship from people who had lived through similar fame, or simply a tight circle of people who reminded them who they were before any of this started. The couples who did not survive tended to let the outside world set the terms of their relationship, responding to every headline, measuring their worth against public approval, and slowly losing the version of themselves that existed before an audience was watching. That is ultimately the fork in the road being described here, dressed up in the specifics of a Heisman winner, a fiancé, a TikTok video, and a football podcast. But underneath all of it sits the same timeless question every person who has ever loved someone on the rise eventually has to answer. Do you let the noise define the relationship, or do you protect what is real underneath it? There is no universal right answer, because every relationship carries its own history, its own trust, its own capacity to weather storms. But there is a clear pattern in what tends to work and what tends to fail, and everything said across this conversation, the talk of counseling, the talk of sponsorship money, the talk of staying off the internet, the talk of understanding what it means to be with someone the world has decided is a prize, all of it points back to the same central idea. Protect the relationship from becoming a performance, protect the parts of it that are sacred and private, and understand that the version of this couple the public sees is only ever a fraction of the truth. The rest of it, the part that actually matters, happens in rooms with no cameras, in conversations no one else will ever hear, and in the daily choice both of them have to keep making about whether they are building something real or simply surviving something loud. Travis Hunter is standing at the beginning of what could be an extraordinary career, and Leanna is standing at the beginning of what could be an extraordinarily difficult, extraordinarily public chapter of her life, whether she fully realized that when this relationship began or not. Neither of them chose an easy path. Fame rarely offers an easy path to the people connected to it. But what happens next, whether they build stronger communication, whether they lean into support systems like counseling, whether they learn to let silence do the work that public statements cannot, will determine far more about their future together than anything said in an 8-minute video ever could. The internet will move on to its next controversy soon enough, as it always does. The real work, the work that actually decides whether this relationship survives the pressures of fame, happens far away from cameras, in the quiet, unglamorous moments where two people either choose each other honestly or slowly drift apart under a pressure most people will never fully understand.